Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board and administration. It's that time of year again when I have the opportunity to stand before you and present the 24-25 budget for the Lenape Regional High School District. And I have to confess that this one's going to really hurt. Since I came onto this board 20 years ago, I've stood here countless times, and each year I've tried to express my concern for the continued lack of support that our school district gets from the state of New Jersey towards our budget, even as we continue to provide an education opportunity and experience that's heads above any others in the state. Our district's no stranger to sacrifice and giving. Year after year, as you'll hear in this presentation tonight, our district has had to struggle with lost revenue, lost funding, but we have found ways to maintain that high standard of education and opportunities that districts has been known for. I'm a graduate of this district, as many of the other board members are. My wife's a graduate, my daughters are a graduate, my brothers are a graduate, and we have all benefited from the educational experience that the Lenape Regional High School District has provided to us. And it really upsets me to have to give you a budget presentation like I'm going to give you tonight. Even with all the cuts that you're going to see tonight that we've had to endure, our district continues to be above most, if not all, the schools in this state. Let me show you what I'm talking about. These are just a few of the highlights that we have for the Lenape Regional High School District. We offer over 236 courses. 24 of those are advanced placement courses. 70 of those are college accelerated programs where we partner with Rowan College of Bronte County and Rowan University. We have a high quality and district special education programs, and option 2. In fact, something that I just amazed by is during the 22-23 school year, 928 of our students took college accelerated programs at our schools and earned 7,229 college credits, in addition to completing state requirements for coursework for the high school diploma. And all this was at no cost to the district or taxpayers. In fact, if you want to put a dollar sign on it, you're talking somewhere over $1 million worth of credits that our families have been able to save because of the college accelerated programs. Our average graduation rate, 97% among our four high schools. Our SAT scores at all 4 high schools are consistently above the state and national averages and among the highest in our region. State and national awards for achievement in areas ranging from television, broadcasting, special education to performing arts, robotics, fine arts, athletics like you heard tonight, and even community service. And every one of our Lenape Regional High School District schools is fully accredited through the Middle States Association Commission on Secondary Schools. Middle States, in fact, has come out and designated our schools worthy of emulation in public secondary education. So looking at our school district and our budget for this year, we are facing a $4.69 million deficit in state funding. Now that sounds like it should reflect maybe the loss of students that we're incurring, but really we're looking at an enrollment decrease of maybe 80 students. So the proportion just doesn't seem right. A 1.23% decrease in students and an almost 20% decrease in state funding. But if you add to that the increase that we have in special education students, students with disability, 3.6% or 40 of our students, we're not even fully funded for special education because the state has a law in there that says that they will only provide support for 15.9% of the population. And in the Lenape district enrollment, we're at 19.1%. So we're actually, in addition to the 4.7 that they're cutting us, we're almost 4.5 million underfunded. Our superintendent has been amazing, along with her staff and administration, in leading the fight against some of the reform that needs to take place in the state of New Jersey. And I've asked her, because of the countless hours and dedication that she's had to this district, also being a graduate of this district, if she would share some of her presentation that she's had the opportunity to share to some of our politicians up in Trenton. Dr. Birnbaum, would you do that, please?
So, at the beginning of the board meeting, I normally have the opportunity to just talk about all the great things that happened in our school district the last month, culled from all the reports the principals give me. We talk about some of the great activities our teachers do to engage our learners, some of the unique professional development opportunities to go on, student achievement in academics, athletics like tonight, extracurricular activities. We love sharing the great news like Abby did tonight about all the things in the school district. But our job as a board isn't always about delivering good news. And there are times that we need to deliver news that's difficult to hear. And tonight is one of those times. I'm going to share how we balance our budget in a state that doesn't fully support education, not for all of its students, the way the headlines claim that it does. I'm going to provide you information on how New Jersey funds education and really how it became a mess. As you just heard from Mr. Stow, the outlook for the fiscal year 25 is devastating. And after I'm finished sharing how New Jersey funds education and how it became a mess, you will get a clear picture of the reasons why we had a budget hole in the millions of dollars prior to the notification of the state aid reduction. So that last sentence down there is really important. Even before the governor announced this drastic aid cut to us, we were already looking at a budget deficit. So just to give you a little bit of history here, many of our staff have seen some of this presentation. School Funding Reform Act was enacted in 2008. That's how it calculates which schools get which money. Half of our current students weren't even born yet, right, in 2008. It was developed to provide equity in resources to the underserved populations. To do that, they created this term called local fair share, okay, to send more of the state's funding to districts in poorer neighborhoods. Districts that have students that the state deems can afford to pay more, the state provides less funding and leaves the wealthier districts to tax at a greater rate. That's how the local fair share was supposed to work. The law was drafted in 2006, and it had a hard time passing. And in order to get it passed by 2008, some deals were made, and districts were promised that they would not see less state aid as a result of the School Funding Reform Act. And what was implemented on the bottom bullet there was called adjustment aid, or what we call flat funding. And it was provided to all districts at that time, so no one would lose state aid after SFRA was in. But unfortunately, the Department of Education didn't really have a chance to see if the funding formula was good or not, because there were so many things that occurred, both through no fault of their own and really through the fault of many. The first thing to interfere with the funding formula was the banking collapse in 2008, right, prompting Governor Christie in 2010 to order massive cuts to all school districts. Our school district that year was cut $6.47 million, or at that time, it was 21%, close to 21% of our state aid, similar to the 20% reduction we're seeing this year in state aid. We cut administrative positions, non-rep employees, cut programs, started trimming in all areas, programs like Behind the Wheel, summer school, and the adult night school were eliminated. It was the start of our students funding their own field trips. And we laid off all of our cafeteria workers as we privatized our food services. And that year we handed out 400 pink slips to certificated staff, which were eventually rescinded as a hiring freeze. The second thing Governor Christie did, the second thing that occurred that year after the state aid reduction was Governor Christie enacted this 2% tax levy cap. It was an arbitrary number. It was accompanied by a toolkit of mandatory cost savings, such as shared services, many of the things that we've implemented at that time and still continue to implement. And we also continue to freeze salaries for certain administrators, reduce positions through attrition, and made other operational cuts during that time. The formula was run, and it was never fully funded, and the district's ability to raise funds through the tax levy cap was capped, all while the cost of everything else was on the rise. And I always say this is analogous to really a budget reduction every year, and I want to explain the simplest way why I think that this is, analogous to a reduction. Let's say, for quick math purposes, you have a $100 million budget, okay? And to move your budget from one year to the next, let's say you think it's going to cost 4%, okay? The cost of everything goes up, right? Health insurance, goods and services, electricity, salaries. Let's say it only costs us 4% to move our budget from one. Well, 4% is $4 million, okay? So you need $4 million, but state aid is flat, right? This is during the time of flat state aid. So you're not getting it from state aid. So you can try and raise revenue, right? You can try and institute things like fees for athletics and activities and other things. But that's only going to get you so much. So you're going to get it from your tax levy cap. Well, you can only tax the community at 2%. So 2% of $100 million is $2 million. So you're only going to be able to raise $2 million in taxes, but you need $4 million. Got this $2 million hole that really isn't going to get filled by all those little tiny revenue things you do. So what do you have to do every single year to make your budget? You got to make cuts, okay? And that's what we had to do every single year. State aid frozen or flat funded, you aren't getting that money from anywhere else but cuts. The bottom line is the School Funding Reform Act. Bottom line is that the School Funding Reform Act was not created to coexist with the 2% cap. It really wasn't. The makers of the School Funding Reform Act didn't have the 2% cap when they envisioned that. Even with state aid funding remaining constant, we were left with that gap, or what we call the 2% tax gap. So here's another law that, or event that actually interfered with the funding formula. It's called S2. So years of flat funding not only had a negative impact on all districts, like I just demonstrated, it also had a severe impact on districts who were seeing their enrollment grow over that time, right? You can imagine your school's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but you only have flat state aid. So those school districts were suffering. And so S2 was created to help those school districts that were deemed underfunded during that period of time. Okay, well, that seems fair, right? The state should make them whole. They should catch them up. But what wasn't fair is that instead of the state providing that money, they took it away from other school districts, ours. And that's when they created the winners and losers. 220 school districts in that year were told that for the next 7 years, they were going to see their state aid reduced. There was no ability for school districts to make up the state aid loss every year because, again, we're capped at 2%. So you can imagine that example that I gave you of having a $2 million hole. Well, that was during flat funding. So now we have this 2% tax gap every year, compounded greater by the reductions in state aid. So as operational costs increase and state aid reductions increase, our holes just got bigger. There's, I think Mr. Stow had mentioned about the percent between the loss in enrollment, right? So this was all created to catch people up that were seeing such a great rate of enrollment that their state aid should catch up to them. And if you can see out there on the handouts, I did put out some handouts over there. One of them has some yellow highlights on it. And NewJersey.com ran this article. During our look-back period, I always say I look back at the years before S2 was created, we went down 10% in enrollment, and we were going to lose 36% of our state aid. It's not proportionate. Next year, we're losing 80 students, right? 1.23% of our student population, we're losing 20% of our state. So what NewJersey.com is, they went even further. They did like a big picture look. They looked at much broader. They looked at when SFRA was implemented in 07, 08, and the percent up and down of school funding and your enrollment up and down in school funding to today. So we're on the bottom of this list here, right? So they said during that entire time, our enrollment went down 12%, but we lost 33% of state aid. It's not proportionate. I always like to point to this. On the second page there, you've got Willingboro. They went down 21% in enrollment, and they went up 37% in state aid. Okay, different seesaw there. But that was the funding formula was supposed to do, right? It was supposed to help the underserved populations. Okay, so we really don't want to compare ourselves to Willingboro, although they're getting $54 million in state aid for 3,000 students. Just so you know, we have close to 7,000 students in our school. We're getting 18 million. But we don't want to compare ourselves to Willingboro. So let's look at someone who may be more like us back on the first page, Delran. Right? Think of Delran. Delran's a really nice community. If you think of all of our 8 townships put together, we're sort of like a Delran, right? Well, they went up in enrollment less than 1%, but they saw their state aid increase 200%. What is going on here? This doesn't make any sense. All right, well, maybe we're wealthier than Delran. Well, who's the wealthiest district in Burlington County? You got Morristown, right? Look on the back page there. Morristown, their enrollment went down 12%, but they increased in their state aid 36%. Okay? All of this is pointing to this funding formula is not working. There is something definitely wrong. It needs to be fixed. So we have here that we were told we were going to be losing at the beginning of this about $8.3 million. That was going to be a projected loss of $26 million. Now, the Department of Education just recently calculated that we really should have lost through S2 $6.8 million. And our total state aid reduction during S2 is $10.32 million, exceeding even what the Department of Education thought that we should lose, which is $3.52 million. And now we know the actual cumulative loss to state aid. It's not a guess anymore. It's over $30 million to our school. Now, if those variables weren't enough, there were some pressure on government officials to lower the amounts public employees pay for health benefits. Okay, so yet another factor that interfered with having to operate school funding, outside influence, if you will. In 2020, there was a law passed to offer savings, right? It was touted as it was going to save districts, taxpayers, and employees money. That's how it got passed by the politicians. It's going to save districts, taxpayers, and employees money, right? It is simply impossible to deliver on those things because what did they forget? The health insurance company, right? Who was going to lose here? Looked like maybe the health insurance companies. Well, the health insurance companies aren't going to lose here. Something embedded in this law was that the employee contribution was going to pay their portion on a percent of their salary versus a percent of the premium, which was previously what we had to do. It was a percent of our premium, of the insurance premium is what was based on our percentage. Well, if the insurance companies are losing money from some of these plans that are offered, what do? They raise their premiums the next year. And if they raise their premiums, but we can't raise what we can get from our employees' contributions, that becomes, again, another hole in our budget, another deficit. We lost revenue with this law. In addition, some of these new plans are also losing the. So just to recap some of these outside influences that occurred, right? We had the 2008 School Funding Reform Act, the funding formula, then the 2% tax cap on levies, and then the flat funding, and the flat funding then triggered S2, and then health deals were made. And stressor after stressor, these laws compounded the needs for cuts in spending, which means cuts in services for our students. And really, don't take my word for it. Here's a quote from the New Jersey School Business Officials Association on just one of those stressors, right, the 2% tax cap. The cumulative effect of not increasing their levies over multiple school years and the consequences of a 2% levy cap prevented many districts from moving forward without making dire spending reductions. These changes also, right, didn't happen in a vacuum. So there was still life happening while all these other outside influences are happening. And that the makers of the Funding Reform Act could have never envisioned, right? And two of the main things that happened that are impacting budgets in every school district here are safety and security and COVID. We all remember, Columbine, which was the very first, notable tragic incident that prompted school districts to be more alert with school security. And that happened in the 90s, so that was before the funding formula was created. And we got really good at drilling and lockdowns and evacuations, but when the funding formula was developed, it only included moderate safety and security aid. It did not and could not have ever imagined the personnel and the infrastructure districts would soon need as a basic part of its security plan. They didn't have a crystal ball to see tragedy after tragedy of the recent mass school shootings after the law was created. Currently, just so you're aware, the school security aid that the Lenape Regional High School District receives only covers 35% of our actual operational costs. And then there's COVID, right? We all want to forget about COVID, but it did drastically change our priorities in a very short amount of time. COVID relief money was temporarily provided to cover the cost of these priorities, that's true. And while we don't have expenses like masks and giant tubs of wipes and busing home meals and overtime for contact tracing anymore, we did change the way we do business. And our budget reflects new reoccurring expenditures like academic support, mental health support through Care Solace. Our reliance on technology and laptops and Wi-Fi are just examples of some new reoccurring costs that are now embedded in our budget. Temporary relief money also, it created an illusion that we were fiscally okay through COVID. And while student enrollment went down during that period, we couldn't really adjust our staff because we would have never been able to open up our schools with students over 30 kids in a classroom and meet the required social distance requirements needed during COVID to reopen schools. Those one-time revenue sources were the Band-Aids that balanced the budget. Mr. Stow actually handed out Band-Aids last year at our public hearing to everyone in the audience last year, just to reflect that, these were Band-Aids and that we were soon going to be at a fiscal cliff. He did warn for several years that a fiscal cliff was coming, right? And then the third major outside influence that occurred, I would say, on the budget and impacting everybody and making our budget holes be in the millions is inflation. Right, inflation is impacting everybody. We have been warning about needing, to prepare ourselves for the budget deficits that we were seeing, and we didn't even see that inflation was coming. So all the warning that we were given was compounded even greater by the huge increase in the CPI. The CPI index right there is, how we measure inflation, and for many years it hovered around between 1.5 and 1.9. And then you can see it just drastically jumped up for the last 2 years, and this huge jump, we've all felt it, to just under 6% and holding steady for 2 years in a row. To give you one small, costly example of how inflation impacts a school district's budget, I'll just highlight the third one there, transportation. During this time period, from 1 year to the next, our transportation costs skyrocketed 27% in just 1 year. Okay? I was talking about conservatively thinking about making your budget move from 1 year to the next 4%. We could have never imagined, nobody would have ever appropriated or even thought that in 1 year our transportation costs would jump 27% in 1 year. I was supposed to be dramatic. Oh, there it is, 27%. Ta-da! Oh, I forgot I put that in. Just so you know, when I was talking about security aid that we get from the state of New Jersey, only covers 35% of our operational costs. The transportation aid we get from the state of New Jersey only covers 25% of our operational costs. So all of these factors indicate that their old funding formula, it needs to be updated. So how do we balance our budget, right? We've got some revenue stream in the middle, the green, our 2% levy and other revenue sources. But then it is just overshadowed by the state aid reductions and the cost of everything going up. What does that give us every year? A budget deficit. So how do we balance it? And the answer is we're going to use a lot of methods, right? We're going to find some one-time revenue sources. One-time revenue sources are things like the Band-Aids I was telling you about, right? The COVID relief money that I was telling you about, or maybe some extra surplus that you have at the end of the year that you can insert next year. Or it comes from like not doing something one year, right? Like not writing curriculum. Well, that's a one-time revenue source because you can't always not write curriculum. But maybe for 1 year, you can just take it out of your budget. Okay, you can get away for that maybe 1 or 2 years, but things need to go back into your budget. So that's what we call one-time revenue sources. They're not a sustainable way to balance your budget. The other methods are through grants, and we get donations. We improve operations. We become more efficient. We cull ideas. We collaborate. We cull ideas from everybody in our organization, and we make cuts in spending. So I just want to walk you through some of the grants. When it comes to grants, we apply for every single grant there is possible. We think it's necessary to do that. We know that it takes time to write and audit, but we do that because we want to get the things for our students that other school districts get, right? Because they get good state aid. The first one there is a huge one, right? The security grant. That was from our Burlington County freeholders. Not called freeholders anymore, but at the time that's what they were called, the commissioners of Burlington County. And that's what you see our vestibules, right? We have those vestibules that slow down an intruder. That's where we're able to pay for those types of upgrades. Another security grant, the bottom there, Alyssa's Law. Okay, another big grant. Mr. Kehoe worked really hard on that. He's in the back there. That allows us to meet Alyssa's Law requirement, which is the simultaneous call to local law enforcement whenever 911 is called or a school is in lockdown. It automatically now goes out to local law enforcement. And then you've got the ARP, CRISA, ESSER, ARP, ACERS. That's the COVID relief money I was telling you about. You'll see there on the second to the bottom there, Unified Sports. Again, we want to offer all the great new things that other school districts have, and Unified Sports has been such a great thing that we added to our school district recently. It's only possible because we have a grant to do it. And last year we got over $500,000. You see the second one there. In a federal grant. That's for our post-grad students. Those are students that we still educate up to age 22, special education students, to work with local area businesses and enhance their out in the community job skills. And like I said, if there's a grant out there, we are going to apply for it if we want the things other districts can afford through state aid. So I talked about collaboration. I just want to let you know, like, where do we get our ideas for cuts, okay? We resurrected an old thing that we did back in 2010, right? In 2010, we were at the same thing, 20% reduction of state aid. Well, we knew at the beginning of S2 where we were going to be at this end of this time. So in 2020, we resurrected some groups. We had about over 100 people in these 5 areas volunteer to sit down with us and come up with ideas on how they could make their areas a little bit more efficient, or maybe things that we could do differently to save money after every year. And we loosely called it our list of 100 ideas, and we went to that list every year for the last few years and came up with some lists of cuts. You'll have it over there in the handout there, just in our S2 impact statement, which goes over all of the areas that we've reduced spending with the goal to preserve the quality of education that we have in our school district. And just to go over a few here, we had to make cuts in personnel. We mostly, through attrition, right? We made sure that if there was a teacher retiring, we were going to study that position and see if we could replace that position or not. And in most areas, we did replace that teaching position, but with a special education teacher, because you saw that our special education population is now over 19%. So in some cases, if a history teacher retired, we were hiring a special education teacher. So you may not have seen our net staff enrollment decline in those years, but there were reasons for that. We merged Cherokee North and South and Lenape North and South, and in so doing that, we eliminated 2 building principals, 2 office managers, several assistants there, and other positions, non-rep positions throughout our district every year for the last few years. We instituted what are called scheduling efficiencies. As enrollment decreased, the number of sections decreased, and we may have teachers now travel from one school to another to fill their schedule. We have combined curriculums in some courses that have low student interest, mostly to keep giving those kids those opportunities at those upper level classes. We unleveled years 1 and 2 world language courses. Certain students can now opt out of PE. We're trying to have our students be less reliant on team teaching the older they get, because they should need less support. And also we cut costs by eliminating all double period courses to single period only, still being able to offer AP Studio Art and art major and woodworking and some of these, technical courses, but now in a single period rather than a double period, just where we can save all of those electives for our students. Transportation saw sharp reductions. Some of you will recall a time when we had 2 late buses, right? We had a 4 p.m. bus and a 6 p.m. bus. Well, the 6 p.m. bus went away in 2010, okay? And then over time, we had to start downsizing our 4 p.m. bus. So when S2 hit, we changed our 4 p.m. bus that went every day of the week to only Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And then we lived with that for a while, and then we just eliminated it altogether. We have now got rid of courtesy busing, so anyone who lives in a 2.5-mile radius of any of our schools has to walk to school. We also created neighborhood bus stops, which is very unpopular with freshman parents. They don't understand why their children have to walk several blocks to a bus stop when the middle school could pick them up right there. This is the reason why. Another unpopular cut we had to make is we had to no longer have dual pickup and drop-off locations for children of divorced families. So we're down to a single pickup for students who share time in 2 homes as a result of a divorce. We eliminated non-public routes, reduced our pay for our dispatch person, and we moved crossing guards off our budget and the townships pick up for them. Other reductions and efficiencies, by combining Cherokee North and South, like I told you about eliminating the principals, we were able to also downsize our school resource officers. We also reduced our security assistants job year, eliminated substitutes, right? We have CAF class now. Most of our teachers, when they're not in, their kids go to the cafeteria and open up their Chromebook and then do their assignment there in a large group area. It does save our school district about $500,000 every year by doing that. Again, these are one-time savings, eliminating buying textbooks or curriculum in certain years. And then we worked on centralizing purchasing. And then, of course, everyone knows parking, club, and athletic fees, right? Every little bit helps. Our kids pay to play sports and do an activity and park on our campus. We adopted a want versus need for everything that we want, right? Our parents have to pay for those types of things for their student athletes or the kids in the play. We added tuition programs. You can go to Seneca, wherever you live in New Jersey. If you want to go to Seneca, you could pay to go to Seneca, and also some small special education programs. And then again, because of S2, we had to go back to the well and increase our athletic fee, and now parents have to pay $300 for their kids to play a sport in our school district. So even with 6 years of cuts in all the areas, still New Jersey demands more sacrifice from our town. And Mr. Stow will soon share our budget, which will include new cuts in all areas, programs, and staff now. There will be someone or something that a student loves, which won't be here next year. Staff who embrace the LRHSD way and made positive connections with our kids, or a program, right, that we offer to broaden our students' experience. There is nothing extra about an extracurricular activity, not in my opinion. They provide the whole experience that is high school, which is why we worked so hard for the past 6 years to really preserve those programs. Also, I want to make sure, there's one little thing here. If anybody, if you hear anybody confusing these 2 things, the referendum projects and the operational budgets are 2 separate buckets of money. Okay, so remember, we were able to obtain necessary upgrades to our facilities for the last few years through a bond referendum. And we did that because the state was giving us 40% towards those renovations, and we were able to have old debt service come off, and we can institute new debt service at a 0% tax increase. So those are types of things that can go into a bond referendum. Those are types of things that go in the operational budget, and you can't take money from the bond referendum and put it in the operational budget to fill a hole. So I just want to make sure, in case there's any confusion there, of why do we have turf, but maybe eliminating X, Y, and Z. They're two separate buckets of money. I want to make sure everyone understands. All right, so now you know the history of School Funding Reform Act and all the forces that occurred after it was passed, which caused us to make strategic cuts for the past decade. And we believe all those cuts were in line with, like I said, our original goal to preserve our educational extracurricular opportunities for our students. And I share this information because we feel it's important for our community to be fully aware of what led us here tonight and to why we're to the point now where uncomfortable and undesirable cuts are inevitable and required of us. There are two things that we need to happen. First, we need immediate restoration of our state aid. And second, we need the state simply just to pay more. We were sitting with somebody and the woman who was evaluating says, they just need to give you more money. And we're like, yeah, duh, right? But that's the School Funding Reform Act, okay? The second thing we need is the state to pay more for our district, and so our district is not reliant on our taxpayers to make up the difference beyond this year. In short, the flaws that we've been witnessing and the implementation of the outdated funding formula need everyone's attention. And so began our campaign this year to fight for restoration aid, because when we were anticipating a 337 loss in state aid, it turned into $4.7 million, which is over 14 times the amount we were projected to. Okay, and that budget hole that we were anticipating now became what I always say is a canyon. So what did we do about this to effect change and get stabilization aid? We spoke out about this injustice, sharing the possible negative impact to our students and to our district, and we worked hard to change the outcome. We alerted the media, because you know what? This issue is not a staff issue, it's not a student issue, it's not a parent issue, it's a community issue. I don't think there's anything better in our towns that I would point to that is the hallmark of that town that isn't our schools. Okay, and so it's a community issue, and so we needed to get to the media, we needed to get beyond our parents, and we needed our community to be aware of what's happening to their schools in their towns. We're also making sure the right politicians hear our story. In January, I testified on Senator Singleton's bill that would better fund special education, because year after year after year, we were underfunded in special education. This was well before we heard about Governor Murphy's state aid reduction, because we understand that special education has been underfunded for so long. Then once the governor announced the proposed cuts in the budget, with massive increases of state aid to some districts and massive decreases in other districts, we testified at the Assembly's and the Senate's public hearings on the budget. And over there in the right corner, I was thrilled to yield my time at the Senate budget hearing to allow Sam Levin and share his passionate speech that he and Dan wrote about how much they care about their school and how badly these cuts would be to our students. And to address the second need that I talked about, right, fixing the funding formula, our school business administrator, Kara Huber, was invited. It was an invitation-only committee discussion on the school funding formula and its future, and they wanted to hear from school districts like ours. Kara is an expert in the school funding formula and was able to offer her excellent opinion on the matter and some solutions also that we see that can make some changes for the long term, right? So we've got short-term fixes and long-term fixes that need to happen. And then most recently, the stabilization bill was introduced in the Assembly, and we did speak about that at the Assembly hearing, Bill A4161. The Assembly did pass their bill, so it went through the full Assembly, and they did pass their bill. The twin version of that bill is going to be heard by the Senate. That is Bill S3081. It's going to be at its first hearing on May 9th week. So the Budget and Appropriations Committee will hear their version of the stabilization. What else did we do? Okay, well, we also appealed to the Department of Treasury, because our first thing when we saw the 19% reduction in state is, well, we thought it was a mistake. Okay, so we sent the data back to them and said, is this a mistake? And they said, nope, your income wealth went up that year 11%. Like, okay, they didn't tell us where that data came from. We had some follow-up questions and didn't get any answers yet, but we will follow up with them, I'm sure of it. We also sent letters to the mayors asking for help. We we appeal to you all, right? We bombarded you with letters saying, hey, do this, do this, do this. And in our last-ditch effort, we did an email campaign to the senators so they would act on Bill S3081. We partnered with other superintendents, and in that partnership, we sent over 70,000 emails to the New Jersey legislature about Bill S3081. Also, I mean, I feel like I'm best friends with all these local politicians here. Kara and I and some board members, we've been very busy meeting with a number of our local politicians to ensure that they are fighting for stabilization aid, short term, and fighting to fix the formula in the future. Our days, nights, and weekends have been spent with these officials on phone calls, Zoom meetings, and in person. And this is not our first rodeo, okay? We've been connecting with other districts like ours, combining efforts, rallying, organizing, social media, email, phone blitzes, and attending Senate and Assembly hearings. That picture below, right there, is from the last time a student volunteered to help. That was in 2020. That's Drew Varleese. We were giving a community forum rally about S2, trying to let people know, hey, the sky will be falling soon. And Drew came up to me at the stage, and he put out his hand. He said, Dr. Birnbaum, I'm Drew Varleese. I love Lenape High School, and even though I'm graduating this year, I want to help you. Right? Well, I wasn't going to pass that up. So I asked him to come, and he spoke about how Lenape has made him the person that he was that day. Pretty remarkable. I don't think he knew he was fighting for the kids that are in our classrooms, right? 4 years later. They didn't listen to him then. They didn't listen to, maybe they're listening now, right? I feel like they are getting some attention now. It's getting some traction. My takeaway from Drew, Dan, and Sam's volunteerism, and all the other students that have and will passionately speak about the activities that they don't want cut, okay, it's simple. The staff in our district and our programs make our schools a place where kids find their passion, find their voices. And I could not be more proud of what we offer, all of it. It is not LRHSD failing our students. It's not LRHSD failing our students, okay? It's our state, a state that claims they support education, but they don't show their support by funding all of its students in all of its towns, as Sam and say. So I want to thank you for your attention during my long presentation, and I'm grateful to our community and our staff and our students who are speaking up against the consistent lack of support by the state of New Jersey for the Lenape Regional High School District. Mr. Stow, can you return to the podium and show the consistent lack of support?
So you're probably on information overload right now. So take a deep breath, shift it around a little bit, because here we go. This graphic gives you an idea of where we are now and where we have been. Somebody classically called this the race to zero. If you were to look at us back in 2019, the state funding for our district was $28 million. In 2025, we're at 18.9. A similar type graph in 1994-95, that little yellow or big yellow spot right there is how much the state of New Jersey funded our school district, over 39%. Flash forward to 24-25, and we are at 12.24%. That has to tell you something about Trenton's opinion of one of the best school districts in the state of New Jersey. There aren't too many that do it better than we do. So for the coming year, we have to present our budget tonight. Even though they can sit at home tonight and worry about this sometime next week, under law, we are required to present our budget by tomorrow. So we have to go with what we've been given. Our budget for the 25 year puts us at $175,136,075. That breaks down into two areas: our debt service, which we haven't increased over years. We promised we weren't going to, but our general fund of $167 million. take away the state support and some other supports that we get federally and grants and things like that, our tax levy for the coming year, which still stays in that 2% that we have to stay with, is going to be $896,000. I want to point out a couple things. First of all is we're down to the 2%, but our health care for the coming year is going to be going up 5.3%. If any of you are in business like me, or you're out there and you have your health insurance on your own, you know what you're going through with health care. We're going through the same thing. Our employees contribute towards it, but nowhere to the extent of a 5.3% increase. And I know that I hear it because I heard it tonight at my own Rotary meeting. One of my members had the nerve to tell me that we should just get rid of a principal or get rid of an assistant principal. And I told him, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll find you a day when you can shadow one of our assistant principals and you come back and tell me whether it's worth what you're going to get paid. Our administrative costs, we rank number 1 out of our regions of students to administrators. Number 1's not, it's a great thing if you're looking at it from the standpoint of cost, but number 1 means that we have the lowest ratio of administrators to the highest number of students. So 1 administrator for every 164 students in our district. We're number 2 out of faculty to administrators. And our total administrative costs, we rank number 10 out of 46. We are $1,087 below 27% below the regional limit. The state says we can go up to $2,575. We're 27% below that. So with the expectations of what they're doing to us, as well as our special education costs, we have a $4.69 million reduction in state aid, but that's actually exemplified by the underfunding of special education that the state does to us. So really, we have a $12.8 million budget deficit that we have to fill this year. We were able to find utilize some funding in fund balances to come up with $2 million, but that still leaves us $10.8 million that we have to find somewheres to balance our budget. That's a new concept for Trenton, balancing a budget. Anyway, so we're looking at areas of operation, fees, student programs, stipends, and even staffing. You're going to hear 3 things. You're going to hear people, program, and positions. That's where this is going to come from. For the 25-year, we are eliminating things like our chance-like contract, an SOR that we have at Cherokee High School. It's actually a situation where an officer is retiring, and we're going to be able to fill that position with an SLEO officer instead, but we're still going to have the security there. We're eliminating some of our non-mandatory special education programs and activities, textbooks and supplies. You already heard about curriculum, transportation, the elimination of some activities at other locations, and even supervision at events, guards versus state police. We're going to have new fees this year or next year. Graduation, our parents, our students are going to have to pay for their cap and gowns. If your student wants to take the PSATs, they're going to have to pay for that. CO of biliteracy tests, even the Chromebook warranty. Parents are going to have to foot the bill for that warranty. Some of these things we may be able to replace if we get that funding that's coming supposedly. But who knows? These guys could change their mind in a heartbeat, and we're still left with what we have here. Student programs and stipend positions. We're reducing things like the Navy Junior ROTC at Cherokee. We're eliminating gymnastics and bowling. We're eliminating 20 clubs that are showing either low participation or a duplication of services. And we're reducing over 20 stipend positions, positions in academic, co-curricular, and athletic. Again, we might be able to restore some of these, but only if we let them know up there how we feel. Staff positions for the coming year. We have reallocated some funds that we're going to use on faculty or facility-related expenses. We've instituted a hiring freeze since December. And these two situations here have allowed us to sort of equalize $2 million in salary. Staff cuts to our budget. Administrative, certificated, non-certificated. These are real people. People that have been a part of our family for years. And some of them are just going to have to go out and find a job somewhere else. We do have over 40 retirements and resignations. Won't be replacing them. 2 positions are being eliminated through a reduction in force. But we have over 90 non-renewals of non-tenured staff for the coming year. Again, there's that hope sitting out there that says maybe they'll restore us. Just in case you had some questions about some of the things I've mentioned, the Chance Light is a contracted service that we use to help our students earn high school credit. The Junior OTC at Cherokee, the program had some students under the limit that the Navy puts on it. And same with gymnastics. Participation has been a little bit light. We had to find cuts somewheres. So a summary of our tax impact on our communities. You'll see that almost every one of our communities, except Evesham, is going to see an increase in their tax for next year. You want a further explanation of how did we figure this out? We didn't. You can see the superintendent or one of us afterwards, and we'll try to explain to you the limited information we have on that formula that the state comes up using our equalized values and so on and so forth. It changes every year. So in summary, we have a decrease of over 20%, close to 20% in state aid. We have our general fund tax levy of 2.08%, and a debt service tax levy of 0, for a total tax levy increase of 2%, which keeps within the required state mandate. Reduction in people, administrative, certificated, non-certificated, reduction in programs, and a reduction in positions. And these will just depend on whether anything happens up in Trenton. What can you do? It's not too late. They're not in session. They're sitting around, trying to make deals with each other. You can go to this site. You can click on that little icon up there. It'll take you right to where you need to be in touch with and who you need to be in touch with. Bill S3081 will restore jobs and programs in the Lenape Regional District. But the ultimate goal is to make them realize that they need to fix the funding formula.